Alright y'all, welcome back to some more Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and I've been meaning to make this video for quite some time, but super counters. I think it's time for me, at least personally, to address this and talk about it on the channel. Now, I'm sure if you follow me on Twitter, or really anyone that plays this game, you know super counter is extremely common and realistically just a terrible mechanic to have, at least in the state it currently is in. And we'll talk about, what I assume the intentions for this mechanic are, but at the end of the day, I'm sure this is, especially now after the recent patch, the thing that stands out the most to many people. And I've talked with a few people myself who just don't want to play the game because of this mechanic. And even me myself, after the recent patch, I think the game is in a much better state than it was on release in terms of just overall game balance. They made a lot of really good changes, and we do need to get them props for it. But there are, again, some issues that still need to be addressed. One thing that's funny enough is the DP battle kind of glitch going on with the HP recovery, which I did make a separate video talking about. But again, we're going to talk about super counters, what exactly they are, in case you're want to get the full data of the cooldown and things like that. Then we'll talk about what they can do to fix it. What I will say is that they are very receptive to feedback, so hopefully, some form of change to super counter is coming. I assume if a lot of y'all left feedback in that feedback portal that they were requesting about super counters, there will be some changes to it, but let's go ahead and hop right into things. First and foremost, I think we do need to address what super counters actually intention was from the developers, as that'll give us important insights on why super counter is actually failing as a mechanic overall. Now, on the official Bandai Namco EU page, there is actually a Sparking Zero combos and feature guide, and they specifically do bring up super counter, of course. Super counter here is listed as a counter that is effective against almost all attacks. By pressing up and then square or X, depending on which controller you're using, you could deliver a huge blow to counter your opponent. It's stated that it can even be used while getting hit, as well as getting hit from attacks from behind, but extremely precise timing is required. So of course there is an actual, not necessarily a skill gap, but there is a restriction, a heavy one that should be there in regards to getting basically a jail out of free card from getting comboed, where if you're able to practice this mechanic enough or know the timing of the game, your knowledge of the game in general, you're likely going to be able to land these a lot more commonly, but it's not going to be a thing that's going to be extremely often in a lot of these matches. Now, I'm sure if you played Sparking Zero online matches, you see that is not the case. And, based on their intentions, it's like, well, why is this not really going through like that? We do actually have the data from the game itself that a friend of mine was able to pull up for me. Again, really huge appreciation for that. Now, we're able to see that the cooldown time for super counters exactly is listed as 0.2 in the data. From there on, we're able to determine that it is a 12 frame and 60 FPS cooldown. And even more simply than that, that means that in 5 times per second, you're able to input the super counter command, which is quite bad for a mechanic that gets you out of any single combo. Every single combo in the game, every single action, you could pretty much super counter. You could super counter revenge counters, you super counter vanish attacks, you could super counter just normal combos in general. Most things in the game, in terms of melee attacks, you're able to get a super counter off against. Now, as a comparison to Budokai Tenkaichi 3, that game was 20 frames and 30 FPS, which is a huge difference. Honestly, almost an astronomical difference. In terms of just a comparison, that means that in BT3, you're likely able to put the input in basically 1 time per second, for the most part. So comparing that, you could do it 5 times as more times in Sparking Zero is where this problem does lie, because it's actually really funny that the actual frame that you have to land super counter in is still 2 frames as well, Now, I'm not actually 100% sure if that is the same in BT3, but regardless, just because the actual frames you have to land it in is the same, doesn't mean that the cooldown should be increased by 5 times. Now, what likely happened is they may have done one of two things if it was a mistake. One, they may have literally forgotten that Budokan Tenkaichi 3 was like a 30 FPS game or something, or they eyeballed the number or something. Realistically, there's not a good explanation for it. The best argument that I could really come up with is that they're trying to adjust for any online lag and things like that. But as we can clearly see, they definitely overshot the amount that's actually needed to be changed. And because of that, we are in a huge super counter fest just all around. And I think what also adds to this is the actual command itself. Now, I assume the command being up and square is intended, of course, to be a simple command, just because of the timing that's supposed to be required and how it's intended to not be a common thing in the first place. But what happens very commonly, especially in online matches, and I've especially seen this post this recent patch, is that on top of being able to mash your way into a super counter, if you're pushing the stick up and trying to do a combo and hit your opponent, there actually is the chance that you just land a super counter instead of actually doing a normal combo. And I'm sure at this point it's played on the screen or already is on the screen, but I had some matches with Super Saiyan 4 Goku yesterday, and I just didn't have a good time. You know, I was able to sidestep a a homing dash. Then I went into attack and counter this guy because of the fact that I was able to sidestep it. But no, because of the fact that he was also mashing the attack button and pushing forward, he super countered me. Like, it's actually unbelievable. And that is literally only possible because of the amount of times you could input the super counter command in a second. 5 times! It's actually absurd. And this is why super counters are as rampant as they are in the game. Just because of this one little setting that they can go in and fix. They if they wanted to, they could go in and adjust it and everything will be resolved. Really, that's all they have to do. And you know, that's where we come into the section of how they could adjust super counter. Easiest way is to just make the timing adjusted properly to like how it was in BT3. Maybe if it was 40 frames and 60 FPS, maybe if it was even like 35 or something, which wouldn't be like the most ideal thing ever. But if it's a thing where you could only get it like once or maybe twice inputted in the second, then that goes more to like how it was in BT3, where again, it can get you out of jail free card, but you have to also be kind of not only more careful on how you're playing the game so that you just don't rush in mindlessly and just do whatever, but it actually does reward you for knowing a lot of these timings and, you know, things like that. Now, again, online play is something that they could consider, so that's why I'm not saying like even like, you know, 45 or 50 frames in a second, because of the fact that there is lag, and I think that's a major reason why they made the gap so wide. But beyond that, I actually do think super counter is fine. I'm not really even asking for a nerf on, like, you know, I don't know, like the damage doesn't really do anything crazy. I think that, you know, where it's applicable is perfectly good as well. I don't think it has to be changed like, oh, only make it from behind. I think really just the cooldown itself needs to be the only thing that's adjusted, because outside of being able to mash it, it's actually not a bad mechanic, and I think they accomplished what their goal was, except for the strict timing and the actual amount of times you could do it in a match. So that's all I really have to say regarding super counter and how they can adjust it. But if you guys have any other ideas on how you feel super counters should be handled, I would like to hear you guys in the comment section below. And at this point, the Dragon Ball Sparking Zero survey is closed. I'm sure that, come January or, March, whenever we start getting these superhero DLCs and Daima DLC packs in 2025, we'll see a lot of more updates rolling out in relation to those DLC packs dropping. So I am still very hopeful for the future of this game. Again, this is not really a doom post, but this is a thing of realistically they do need to be worried about it, because if they don't fix it, then it could really kill the game. But if they do fix it, no problem at all. So again, let me know what y'all want to see from super counters or any other mechanic adjusted in the game. Thanks y'all for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.